There are kings, and then there are empires, vast realms where power flows like rivers, wealth piles like mountains, and influence spans thousands of miles. In the southern half of Africa, far from the courts of Europe, there once stood such an empire, a golden throne commanding respect across continents. The Portuguese called this realm Ethiopia Inferior, not to diminish it, but to mark it as the southern counterpart to Abyssinia or Ethiopia Superior. But this was no lesser land. Imagine an empire stretching from the turquoise coast of Zanzibar, through the gold fields of Manica, over the granite hills of Manica, across the salt plains of Dand, all the way to the rocky tip of the Cape of Good Hope. This was no mere kingdom. It was an empire of kingdoms. At its height, the Mwene Mutapa, the lord of the conquered lands, ruled over 25 vassal kings, each governing their own provinces but bound by loyalty to his imperial throne. His court was a hub where the wealth of Africa gathered, gold dust measured by gourds, ivory tusks as long as a man's arm, elephant herds trained for war, sugar and salt traded like silver coins, and fabrics dyed in colors only the elite could afford. The empire's riches were no secret. They flowed out in caravans, to the coast at Sofala, to the dhows of Swahili merchants, to the ships of Arab traders, and from there into the markets of India, Persia, and Arabia. By the time the Portuguese arrived in the early 1500s, they were entering a trading network older than Lisbon itself. But the Mutapa Empire was more than gold and trade. It was a symbol of power and prestige. An empire whose name echoed across continents and whose influence shaped the fate of southern Africa for centuries. To Europeans, it seemed to match the legends of the biblical Ophir, the mysterious land from which King Solomon's ships brought back gold and ivory to adorn his temple. They recalled the Book of Genesis, which speaks of the land of Avila.
And the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone.
Could this African empire be that ancient land? Could the Mwene Mutapa be the heir to a gold trade stretching back to Solomon's day? For the Portuguese captains, merchants, and priests venturing inland, this journey was as much about faith as fortune. They dreamed of converting this mighty emperor to Christianity, forging an alliance that would give Portugal both spiritual glory and economic dominance. But they were far from the first foreigners to arrive here. Long before the Europeans, the Mutapa court welcomed Arab traders from the north, Swahili merchants from the coast, and emissaries from inland chiefdoms. The Mwene Mutapa was no stranger to diplomacy or war. His imperial throne was both a seat of justice and a fortress of power. Those who served him brought tribute. Those who defied him faced swift and merciless punishment. This is the story of the Mwene Mutapa, an empire of gold, rivers, and kings. We will journey through its birth, its rise, its glory, and its fall. From the salt-seeking mission of Nyatsimba Mutota to the iron will of Mavuram Hand and the fateful arrival of the Portuguese. This is the legend of the Golden Throne of Ethiopia Inferior. Our story begins centuries before the Portuguese ships appeared on Africa's east coast, in the heart of the southern continent, where great stone walls rise without mortar, still whispering secrets of a lost era. Great Zimbabwe was the capital of a flourishing civilization, a city built by the ancestors of the Shona people, with massive granite enclosures, soaring towers, and intricate trade networks reaching far beyond its borders. But in the early 1400s, a new chapter began. In the royal family of Great Zimbabwe, a prince named Nyatsimba Mutota set out on a mission, not to expand borders by war, but to secure the lifeblood of kingdoms, salt. Salt was the white gold of Africa's interior, essential for preserving food and vital for health. It was a rare and precious commodity, controlled by powerful coastal and inland groups. Mutota's quest led him northwards, beyond the Zambezi River, into the lands of the Tavara people, who guarded rich salt mines in the region called Dan. According to oral tradition and Portuguese chronicles, Mutota conquered the Tavara by force, declaring himself Mwene Mutapa, the Lord of the Conquered Lands. This title was not just a name. It was the birth of an empire. From this salt-rich heartland, Mutapa expanded his authority. His descendants would grow the realm, extending influence over the fertile plateaus of Manica and Manica, the ivory-rich forests near the Zambezi, and the gold-laden hills farther south. The empire that emerged was vast and complex. An imperial state composed of multiple provinces, each ruled by local chiefs who paid tribute to the Mwene Mutapa. The capital shifted several times, but was often near the gold mines of Great Zimbabwe and later near the trading port of Sofala on the Indian Ocean coast. Trade became the backbone of the empire's wealth and influence. Caravans laden with gold dust, ivory, leopard skins, and iron goods traveled to the coast, where Swahili and Arab merchants awaited to carry these treasures to far-off lands. The Mwene Mutapa controlled these trade routes with a firm hand. Tribute was collected, taxes were levied, and the flow of goods was regulated to maintain the empire's prosperity and power. Portuguese chroniclers, arriving in the 16th century, were astonished by the scale of this empire. Father João dos Santos, a Jesuit missionary, described the Mutapa ruler as a man of great authority, whose influence extended over vast territories, commanding armies and overseeing a sophisticated court. Yet, despite its wealth and power, the Mutapa Empire was no simple monarchy. It was an empire held together by alliances, marriages, and the careful balancing of local chiefs' ambitions. This political complexity would become both its strength and its weakness in the centuries to come. From a humble mission to secure salt, Nyatsimba Mutapa planted the seeds of a golden empire, an empire that would shape the destiny of southern Africa and captivate the imagination of the world. The Portuguese sailors and mapmakers of the 16th century, the vast territories south of Abyssinia were a mystery, a land they came to call Ethiopia Inferior. This was no accident. European explorers often used the name Ethiopia broadly to describe much of sub-Saharan Africa, especially the regions known to them through ancient accounts and biblical references. But Ethiopia Inferior was unique. It stretched from the bustling Swahili trading ports of Zanzibar and Kilwa, along the shimmering coastlines of Mozambique and down the Eastern Highlands, all the way to the southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope. Within this expansive territory, the Mwene Mutapa's empire held sway, an empire not confined to a single kingdom, but a complex tapestry of peoples, languages, and cultures. This empire was divided into provinces governed by vassal kings, each loyal to the Mwene Mutapa. They owed tribute and military support, yet maintained local authority. The empire's geography was as diverse as its people, from the salty marshes near the coast, to the fertile plateaus rich in gold and iron, to the rugged mountain ranges where powerful clans held their sway. This was a land of great wealth and great challenge. The Zambezi River was the lifeblood of the empire, providing water for agriculture and a highway for trade deep into the interior. Gold mines near the river produced the precious metal that made the empire famous, gold that was weighed in gourds and sent in caravans to the coast, where it was traded for cloth, beads, and other luxury goods. Salt, too, was crucial, harvested from inland deposits and traded along the great trade routes. The empire's ports, especially Sofala, were gateways to the Indian Ocean trade network. Swahili and Arab merchants brought spices, textiles, and porcelain, while taking away African gold, ivory, and slaves. Portuguese explorers arriving in this world in the early 1500s were struck by the sophistication of the empire's trade and political organization. They documented not only the wealth, but also the complexity. The Mwene Mutapa was not a simple ruler, but an emperor presiding over many kings, each with his own court and army. The empire of Ethiopia Inferior was vast and vibrant, a land of wealth, power, and deep history, waiting to be understood by the wider world. Long before the Portuguese reached the shores of East Africa, The lands of Ethiopia Inferior were already woven into a vast and ancient network of trade routes, pathways that linked the African interior to the coasts of the Indian Ocean and beyond. These routes were the lifelines of commerce, culture, and power. For centuries, Arab and Moorish traders had traveled these dusty paths, carrying goods such as salt, gold, ivory, and exotic animals. The Portuguese chroniclers noted with keen interest how these trade routes had Moorish origins, passed down through generations from North Africa and the Middle East. The Moors, skilled navigators and merchants, had established connections between the great Saharan caravan routes and the coastal trading cities like Kilwa, Mombasa, and Sofala. Through these routes flowed not just goods, but ideas, religions, and technologies, Islamic culture, Arabic language, and new methods of shipbuilding and navigation. The Mwene Mutapas Empire thrived along these arteries of trade, controlling key junctions and taxing caravans that moved goods from the interior to the coast. This ancient network also linked the empire to the fabled lands mentioned in biblical and classical sources, Ophir and Havilah, lands rich in gold and precious stones, thought by some to be part of the Mutapa realm. The Portuguese, inspired by these legends and their encounters with local rulers, believed they were on the trail of the biblical Ophir, a land whose riches had once adorned Solomon's temple. The Moorish and Arab traders' long presence ensured that the Mutapa Empire was no isolated kingdom, but a player in a global network of commerce and diplomacy. Their routes shaped the economic and cultural landscape of southern Africa for centuries, a legacy the Portuguese were eager to tap into as they expanded their empire. Captivate, the uncle and ruler of the Mutapa Empire, was a steadfast defender of his realm's sovereignty. When Portuguese explorers and missionaries arrived on the eastern coast of Africa in the early 16th century, Captivate resisted their growing influence. He sought to protect the empire's wealth, its gold, ivory, and salt, from being exploited by foreign powers. Captivate forces engaged in armed resistance against Portuguese incursions, determined to preserve the independence of Ethiopia Inferior. However, despite his courage and strategy, he could not match the Portuguese's superior weaponry, including cannons and firearms, nor their naval power that disrupted crucial trade routes. Amidst this turmoil, his nephew, Mavurumhand, also known as Mavura, chose a different path. Rather than opposing the Portuguese, Mavurumhand aligned himself with them, possibly providing information and political support that weakened Captivate's position. This alliance allowed Mavurumhand to rise in power, ultimately leading to Captivate's overthrow. Following his ascent, Mavurumhand and his council accepted baptism, symbolizing a new chapter in Portuguese Mutapa relations, one marked by cooperation and growing European influence. Captivate's valiant but unsuccessful fight against foreign dominance exemplifies the difficult choices faced by African rulers during this period of upheaval. Following the overthrow of Captivate, Mavurumhand's rise to power, and his baptism as Felipe, was not just a turning point inside the royal court. It became the centerpiece of a Portuguese campaign to present the Mono-Mutapa Empire as a Christian ally ready for European trade and influence. In 1631, this image reached Europe in the form of an engraving titled Le Grand Roi Mono-Mutapa. It was more than art. It was propaganda. The inscription read,
"The great King Mono-Mutapa, very powerful and so rich in gold that some call him the Emperor of Gold. Most kings are his tributaries, included under Lower Ethiopia, whose children are raised in his palace to keep their fathers in obedience. His kingdom is of very great extent, having a circuit of nearly 800 leagues. He sustains strong wars against Prester John, Emperor of the Abyssinians. He holds his court at Zimbabwe, where he keeps for his ordinary guard women and 200 large fierce dogs." The account of the year 1631 tells us that this King Mono-Mutapa had himself baptized, together with his entire court, by the Reverend Fathers Jesuits. This monarch is served only on bended knee. In this kingdom there are women who go to war and serve as well as the men in his armies. There are great numbers of elephants, swift horsemen, the fastest horses. Idolaters, sorcerers, adulterers, and thieves are very rigorously punished. There is an abundance of sugar and several gold mines. These people are black, valiant, and well disposed.
To the Portuguese, every line of this served a purpose. His title as Emperor of Gold promoted the idea that controlling Felipe meant controlling vast mineral wealth. The mention of Ethiopia inferior tied his lands to the old Moorish trade routes the Portuguese coveted. The note that his courtiers' children were raised in his palace implied a centralized power the Portuguese could influence. Most importantly, the reference to his baptism was a signal to Europe. Here was a Christian monarch, obedient to Jesuit teaching, whose laws punished idolaters and whose resources, from sugar to gold, could be channeled to Portuguese ports. The engraving left out the tension beneath the surface. Felipe's baptism was not a surrender of sovereignty, but neither was it a purely African decision. It was a bargain, one in which the Portuguese gained access to the wealth of the Mutapa heartland, while Felipe secured foreign backing to keep his rivals at bay. For Lisbon, this portrait was proof that the Mono Mutapa was now part of their world. For the Mutapa people, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where foreign trade brought both opportunity and the slow erosion of independence. The Mutapa Empire's wealth was built on its control of rich natural resources, particularly gold, a treasure that drew traders from across Africa, Arabia, and beyond. Gold from the mines near Great Zimbabwe and Manica was carefully weighed in gourds and carried by caravans across vast distances. The empire's ports, especially Sofala, were vibrant hubs where African gold met Arab, Persian, Indian, and later Portuguese merchants. This trade network was not merely economic. It was part of a tapestry woven with legend and history. European explorers, inspired by biblical tales, believed the land of the Mutapa Empire might be the ancient Ophir, the source of King Solomon's legendary gold. The Bible describes Ophir as a distant land rich in gold, precious stones, and exotic goods, a place that fueled Solomon's wealth and the grandeur of his temple. In the 19th century, scholars like Henry Keene, in works such as The Gold of Ophir, argued that the African goldfields controlled by the Mutapa Empire matched these ancient descriptions. While historians debate the exact location of Ophir, the connection to southern Africa's gold wealth highlights the global fascination with this empire. The legacy of this trade shaped not only local economies, but also the geopolitics of the Indian Ocean world. Even as Portuguese power grew, the networks established by Arab and Swahili traders remained vital. The Mutapa Empire was a key player in an interconnected world of commerce and culture. The golden trade routes carved by the Mutapa linked Africa to Asia and Europe, leaving a legacy of wealth, influence, and myth that echoes to this day. No empire lasts forever. The Mutapa Empire, once vast and powerful, began to face mounting challenges in the late 17th and 18th centuries. Internal strife, succession disputes, and growing pressure from Portuguese colonial ambitions weakened the fabric of the empire. Portuguese control over coastal ports tightened, disrupting traditional trade routes and limiting the empire's access to overseas markets. European diseases, introduced through increased contact, also took a toll on local populations and leadership. Meanwhile, neighboring groups and rival states seized opportunities to assert their independence or expand their own territories. Despite these trials, the Mutapa Empire's cultural and political legacy endured. Its stone ruins continue to inspire awe and serve as a symbol of African ingenuity and resilience. The oral traditions, music, and crafts of the Shona people preserve the memory of this great empire. Even today, scholars and communities recognize the Mutapa Empire as a foundational chapter in the history of southern Africa, a testament to a sophisticated African civilization that thrived long before European colonization.